Did you guys catch that exchange? Because, wow, I knew it was going to be tense, but I didn't expect Senator Ted Cruz to come out swinging like that. Before we even get into the details, just listen to the atmosphere in that room. Every question seemed to make things more uncomfortable, and every answer seemed to raise even more questions. Whether you agree with Cruz or not, one thing is undeniable. This hearing wasn't just another routine day in Washington. It felt like two completely different versions of reality colliding right there in front of everyone. Welcome back to the Political Brief. If you're new here, make sure you hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and let us know your thoughts down in the comments. We cover the biggest political moments happening in America, break them down, and give you a perspective you won't always hear from the mainstream media. Now, let's get into what just happened because there is a lot to unpack.
For statutory changes, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Ossoff. Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, every day when I'm home in Texas, I hear from Texans who are deeply dismayed about the growing politicization and weaponization of the Department of Justice and the FBI. If you are not, every one of you should be deeply concerned about the damage being done to the integrity of the institutions in which you operate. My office hears regularly from FBI agents and from assistant U.S. attorneys who are likewise concerned about the politicization and weaponization of the Department of Justice and the FBI, and this is profoundly damaging to the rule of law in our nation. Last month, a whistleblower brought to light the existence in the FBI of a report, an FD 1023, in which the informant alleges that President Biden and his family members engaged in a $5 million bribery scheme during his time as vice president. Deputy Director Abbate, is it true that the FBI has a report making those allegations?
I'm not going to comment on that, Senator.
And why is that?
I'm just not going to comment on information we received, investigations, or
Do you owe an
ongoing matters.
obligation to the American people to be candid about evidence of corruption by the President of the United States?
This is an area that I'm not going to get into with you, Senator.
Well, I understand you don't want to, and that's why people are mad at the FBI, because you're stonewalling and covering up serious allegations of evidence of corruption from the president. Yesterday, Senator Chuck Grassley stood on the Senate floor and alleged that there are 17 recordings of this informant from Burisma, Ukrainian natural gas company. 15 of them are recordings, voice recordings of him talking to Hunter Biden. 2 of them are voice recordings of him talking to Joe Biden. Deputy Director Abbate, does the FBI have 17 voice recordings laying out evidence of a bribery scheme?
Senator, I would add also that we've worked with the House Oversight Committee.
Yeah, this is the Senate. We're the other side of the Capitol. This is the Senate. Do you have those 17 recordings?
I'm not going to comment on any investigative matters, Senator.
See, that's the problem. The FBI, and I've had this conversation with Chris Wray too, this is why you are damaging the institution. The American people have a right to know whether there is serious, credible evidence that the President of the United States took a $5 million bribe. And by the way, if it's false, Chairman Durbin just rolled his eyes. If Chairman Durbin were interested in the rule of law, we would have a hearing on these allegations. But of course, the Democrats don't want a hearing on these allegations. And to be clear, if the allegations are false, you know who could disprove them? Joe Biden. He could call for this to be released publicly. But the FBI is stonewalling. Would you agree?
2 things, Senator. No
Sure.
one's stonewalling. The 1023
You just said you refused to answer the
was provided
question.
in response to a subpoena.
Okay,
to the
then why'd
House
you refuse
Oversight
to answer my
Committee.
question?
The pertinent information is there, and I reject your assertion that the
Why
FBI
did you
is
refuse to answer
politicized.
my question?
I just answered your question.
Okay, so yes, you have a 1023. Do you have the 17 recordings? Yes or no?
I'm not going to get further into that.
So you're stonewalling. You can't say I'm not refusing to answer your question, but I won't answer your question.
I'm going to answer within the parameters that we operate in. here.
That's the problem. The FBI has right now an unlimited hubris that you believe you are unaccountable. You don't believe you're accountable to the United States Congress, and you don't believe you're accountable to the American people. and you are doing damage. The FBI is a great institution. When I go home to Texas, people ask me, should we abolish the FBI? Now, I tell them no, because you have heroes and patriots working for you that are catching child predators, that are catching terrorists. But you're sitting there happily erecting a wall to protect Joe Biden. Will you provide to this committee, not the House, the Senate Judiciary Committee, will you provide the FD 1023 and will you provide the 17 recordings so we can assess what is the evidence, the specific credible evidence that Joe Biden personally took a $5 million bribe from a foreign national?
Senator, we will work with this committee, you and other members, to provide the information within the parameters of the process.
Will you provide the FD 1023, yes or no?
I will take that back, and we will work with our
So you're not answering that. Will you provide the 17 recordings?
We will take that back, and we'll work with you.
So you're not answering that either. Did you investigate in any way, shape, or form these allegations?
Senator, once again, I'm not going to comment.
So
on
you're not going to say
investigative.
whether you did your job?
We do our job to the very best of our ability.
Well, not here. You're not answering a single question to the American people. And you may think this is esoteric. I promise you, millions of Americans are concerned. You know who isn't concerned? Not a single Senate Democrat. We're going to go through this whole hearing. Not one Democrat will ask a question about this. You know who else isn't concerned? The corporate media, who is joining with the Democrats in covering up this evidence. If Joe Biden is innocent, the evidence should be made public and demonstrate that he's innocent. But if he is not, is it true this informant who alleged that he personally took a bribe was an informant the FBI had relied upon previously in other investigations? Yes or no?
Senator, in each and every investigation that we have, all the work that we do,
I asked you
the
a yes or no
expectation
question.
is that every logical avenue of investigation be pursued
I asked you a
to
yes
its
or no
fullest.
question. Are you going to answer it?
Yeah, I'm answering your question.
Was the informant one you had relied on previously in other investigations? Yes or no?
Senator, we run down every piece of information. Every
You're not
lead,
answering it then. You're refusing to answer
objectively,
it. So you're refusing to answer the
to
question.
the fullest extent possible.
refusing to answer the question.
relentlessly,
Is that
and
correct?
aggressively in
Senator,
all
your time has
instances.
Senator, your time
It's
is
disgraceful. It's disgraceful, Deputy Director Abbate. Disgraceful.
Senator, your time has expired. Senator Tillis?
Chairman, I think Senator Blackburn goes before me, or Senator Welch. I appreciate the opportunity, but
Thank you, Senator Tillis. It's Senator Welch is next.
So going into this hearing, I had heard that Senator Ted Cruz planned to press FBI Deputy Director Paul Abbate over allegations involving President Joe Biden, an FBI informant report, and those controversial claims surrounding Burisma. But honestly, I wasn't expecting Cruz to be this relentless. The moment Cruz began speaking, you could tell he wasn't interested in long speeches or political theater. He got right to the point. He said that every time he goes home to Texas, he hears from people who believe the Department of Justice and the FBI have become increasingly politicized. Now, whether you're a Republican, Democrat, or independent, that's actually a serious issue. Public trust in federal law enforcement is essential. Once people start believing that justice depends on politics rather than facts, confidence in the entire system starts to erode. Cruz wasn't just speaking about what voters have told him. He also claimed that FBI agents and assistant U.S. attorneys have privately expressed concerns about politicization inside their own institutions. That's a significant claim because it suggests these concerns aren't only coming from political activists or cable news commentators. According to Cruz, they're coming from people working within the system itself. Then Cruz turned to what many conservatives have been talking about for months, the FBI's FD 1023 informant report. This document has generated enormous controversy because it reportedly contains allegations from a confidential source claiming that then Vice President Joe Biden and members of his family were involved in a multi-million-dollar bribery scheme. Now, it's important to separate allegations from proven facts. Allegations are not proof. They require investigation and verification. But Cruz's argument wasn't that guilt had already been established. His argument was that the American people deserve transparency about whether these allegations were thoroughly investigated. That's where things became uncomfortable. Cruz asked a straightforward question. Does the FBI have a report making these allegations? Deputy Director Abbate immediately declined to answer. I'm not going to comment. That phrase would become the theme of the entire exchange. Again and again, Cruz asked direct yes or no questions. Does the FBI have a report? Does it have the alleged recordings? Will you provide them to the Senate Judiciary Committee? Did the FBI investigate these allegations? Every time, Abbate responded with essentially the same position. He refused to discuss investigative matters. Now, from the FBI's perspective, there are understandable reasons why officials often avoid commenting on ongoing or confidential investigations. Agencies routinely argue that protecting investigative integrity requires limiting what can be discussed publicly. But here's where many conservatives, including myself, see the problem. When it comes to politically sensitive investigations involving Republicans, we've watched details leak to the media with astonishing speed. Anonymous sources seem ready to talk. Documents somehow find their way into newspapers. Stories dominate headlines for weeks. Yet when allegations involve prominent Democrats, suddenly we're told everything is confidential. Whether that's a fair characterization or not, it's the perception many Americans have developed over the last several years. And perception matters because it shapes trust. Cruz clearly wasn't buying the explanation. He accused the FBI of stonewalling Congress. He accused the Bureau of protecting President Biden. And perhaps the strongest moment came when he said the FBI's unwillingness to answer was doing more damage to the institution than any criticism from outside. That caught my attention, because as someone who considers himself a conservative patriot, I don't want to see the FBI fail. Quite the opposite. I want Americans to have confidence that federal law enforcement applies the law equally regardless of party. I agree with Cruz when he said the FBI has heroes working inside it. There are agents risking their lives tracking terrorists, rescuing children from predators, stopping violent criminals, and protecting the country every day. Those men and women deserve respect. But leadership also matters. When agency leaders appear unwilling to answer reasonable oversight questions from elected representatives, it fuels public suspicion, even if there are legitimate legal reasons for remaining cautious. Another fascinating moment came when Cruz pointed towards Senate Democrats. He argued that none of them seemed interested in asking questions about these allegations. He even mentioned Chairman Dick Durbin rolling his eyes during the exchange. Cruz's broader argument was that if Republicans were facing identical allegations, Democrats would demand hearings, investigations, and nonstop media coverage. Now, whether someone agrees with that comparison depends largely on their political perspective. But it's certainly true that Americans increasingly believe our political institutions apply different standards depending on who holds power. That's an incredibly dangerous place for any democracy. One exchange I found especially revealing involved the alleged recordings. Cruz referenced claims that there were supposedly 17 recordings connected to the confidential source, 15 involving Hunter Biden and 2 involving Joe Biden. Instead of confirming or denying whether such recordings existed, Abbate again refused to comment. Now think about that from the average viewer's perspective. If the allegations are completely false, people naturally ask why not simply say so. If they cannot be discussed because of investigative rules, officials often cannot satisfy that curiosity. That gap between public expectations and institutional practice creates room for speculation. As conservatives, I think we should be careful not to jump straight from unanswered questions to conclusions. Accountability means following evidence wherever it leads, not assuming guilt before facts are established. At the same time, asking questions of powerful officials is exactly what Congress is supposed to do. Oversight is part of the constitutional system, and it shouldn't stop because the subject is politically sensitive. Cruz also made another point that resonated with many conservatives. He said Americans don't want to abolish the FBI. They want an FBI they can trust. That's an important distinction. Sometimes political debates become so polarized that people assume criticism of an institution means opposition to the institution itself. It doesn't have to. Supporting law enforcement also means expecting transparency, professionalism, and equal application of the law. Near the end of the exchange, Cruz asked perhaps the simplest question of all. Did the FBI investigate these allegations? Again, there was no direct answer. At that point, Cruz declared the situation disgraceful, arguing that the American people weren't receiving answers from an agency funded by taxpayers and accountable to Congress. Whether viewers agree with Cruz's conclusion or believe Abbate was simply following long-standing FBI policy, one thing is difficult to deny. This hearing illustrated just how deep the trust gap has become between many Americans and some of the country's most powerful institutions. Personally, I think that's the bigger story. This isn't just about one hearing. It's about confidence. If Americans lose confidence that justice is blind, the consequences reach far beyond any single administration. Conservatives have argued for years that equal justice means exactly that, equal. The law shouldn't care whether someone has an R or AD next to their name. Investigations shouldn't be judged by politics. Transparency shouldn't depend on who's in office. If allegations are false, thorough investigations should demonstrate they're false. If misconduct occurred, accountability should follow regardless of political affiliation. That's the standard Americans should expect. At the end of the day, this hearing didn't settle the controversy. If anything, it probably raised even more questions than it answered. We'll continue watching closely because these issues aren't going away anytime soon, and we'll be here to cover every major development. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to The Political Brief, and turn on notifications so you never miss our coverage of the biggest political stories shaping America. Most importantly, I want to hear from you. Do you think Senator Ted Cruz asked fair questions? Do you believe the FBI should have provided more direct answers? Or was Deputy Director Abbate simply following proper investigative protocol? Let everyone know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.